Good evening. Today we will set sail to discover the Cotswolds Distillery and its refined whiskies. Founder Daniel Szor will guide us through this exclusive tasting, sharing a fascinating story full of passion. That of a man from New York who fell in love with the picturesque English countryside. This love inspired him to create his own distillery with the goal of producing a whiskey of excellence, capable of reflecting the harmony and the beauty of those lands. As he said in an interview with the Angel's Share magazine, you have to have a vision. A concrete vision that we will taste together today. The presentation took place at the tasting days in Götzis. You can already find the dedicated video here on the channel. The link is in the description. Now I'll hand it over to Daniel. Enjoy the show.
Now it's his stage, so the movie is going on, and if you need some new glasses, we have enough. So if you want a clean glass for the next drum, it's no problem. So it's we have one pleasure. Please don't take the glass outside. I need it. I have to give it back. So it's okay. So now it's your stage, Daniel. Thank you very much.
How long? Because
how long they are interesting?
Yeah. If any of you want just go like that, I'll stop.
So
yeah.
Yeah. So okay. If it's
Yeah. It's maybe not that extreme, but yeah. Great. Great.
Please be careful. I need him. So.
Well, anyway, thank you for all coming.
Don't touch.
It's a great pleasure. I think Herbert was explaining that I have this crazy job this year, which is I'm the 378th master of the Worshipful Company of Distillers, which is one of 114 old London livery companies representing different trades, and the Worshipful Company of Distillers started 1638. I don't know why they decided what they needed was a guy from New York to be the master this year, but they chose me. And so in addition to trying to run Cotswolds, I'm doing this other thing. And I wasn't able to plan on going to many whiskey shows, but this worked out lovely, very well. And it's a pleasure to come because there's nothing better when you are making whiskey and owning a brand than to actually speak to people directly and seeing their reactions. So I thought maybe I could give you a little perspective, maybe different from some of the other stands, the brand ambassadors you're seeing, because here you're talking to a guy who was like you. You only have to go one step further in your craziness about whiskey to go really crazy and just take your life savings and build a distillery because you want to make whiskey, which is why I did this. I spent 30 years in finance doing something I didn't really like to do, and in my spare time I went to whiskey shows and I went to Scotland and I visited distilleries and I saw very nice people making very nice products in a very nice part of the world. And I thought one day, actually I had so the Cotswolds, I don't know if any of you know this region, is about 150 kilometers west of London. It's a beautiful area. It's, I think, the most beautiful part of Britain, and it gets 40 million visitors, so many people think the same way. And it gets a lot of people from London who get a house for the weekend, and I had a little farmhouse that we would go to at the weekend, and one day I went outside the house, and we live in the middle of someone else's farm, and we watch what they're growing, and in the summer of 2012.
If they also can enjoy.
Come on in, absolutely.
So one chair here.
Yeah, just getting started. So here we go. Please, I'll stand over here. So I saw barley growing next door, and I thought we have the local barley, and we have 40 million people coming to the Cotswolds. Maybe we could make a distillery. And so we started in 2014. We found property. We found it had 2 buildings. We renovated the buildings. We bought our stills from Forsyth in Scotland. I didn't know how to make whiskey. but I found two Scottish gentlemen who between them had 100 years of experience making whiskey. One of them, Harry Coburn, very well-known guy in whiskey, and he had run Bowmore for several years, and Inver House, a lot of different distilleries. And the other one, very well-known, you may have heard his name, Jim Swan. Have you heard of Dr. Jim Swan? Amazing gentleman, passed away in 2017, but responsible for he worked with many of the distilleries that are out there. Cavalan, he made very famous. Kilhoman, the list goes on of distilleries that Jim worked with, and he was an amazing guy, and he helped us come up with the flavor profile for Cotswolds. I'll tell you just one or two more things about the whiskey, and then we'll start to drink some whiskey. We started in 2014 with very small stills. We had a 2,600 liter wash still, 1,900 liter, 1,600 liter spirit still, 8 washbacks. The grain, based on the original idea I had, is Cotswolds grain. It's grown, the barley is grown about 15 minutes away from us. There's a very famous estate near us, Blenheim Palace, if you've heard of Blenheim Palace, where Winston Churchill was born. Beautiful, I think after Buckingham Palace, the second most visited palace in Britain. And it's a few thousand acres, and the barley is actually grown on that estate by a tenant, a family, 5th generation family of farmers. They send it to be malted to a place called Warminster Maltings, which is about 100 kilometers away in Wiltshire. Warminster Maltings is the oldest maltings in all of Britain, and it's still a traditional floor malting. So all of our barley, 100%, is floor malted, raked by hand. And we're out there, we're standing next to Springbank, which is I think the only other distillery in Britain, including Scotland, which is 100% floor malted barley. It's very nice. I was actually visiting Maltings 2 weeks ago, and it's an amazing place. If you ever go to Britain, if you're in that part of the world, it's near Bath in the south of England. A lot of barley is growing in the south of England. And this Maltings, which is, I think, 200 years old now, is a fantastic thing to see. So the barley comes up to us, and we're milling, we're mashing, we're fermenting, distilling, casking, aging, bottling, everything at the distillery. Our distillate, our new make spirit, which unfortunately I don't have with me because I love to start everything with the new make because this is the DNA. We have a lovely new make whiskey. It's almost more like, if you try it, it's almost more like a Kirsch. It's like a grappa. It's pure, it's fruit, it's creamy, it's sweet. And it's all because really of Jim Swan. It's because of what he taught us, how to mash. So typically we look for a very clear wort when we mash. We don't use the rakes. We want the liquid to be perfectly clear because Jim taught us that the more clear the wort, the more fruity the beer. The more fruity the beer, those esters will come through into or those acids will become esters in distillation, and they will give you a lovely fruity new make. Our fermentations are long, they're about to 92 hours. We're using 2 types of yeast, distiller yeast and a yeast called fermentus, which is also encouraging fruitiness. Our cuts, most of the Jim Swan distilleries all have the same kind of cuts. They're very high and they're very narrow. We start at 75 degrees of alcohol and we stop at 69 degrees of alcohol. In Scotland, typically, you would get maybe 63, 62, 60, for peated, maybe 58. But the lower you go, the more rough grain taste you have, and the more years it will take for that to come out. And it may give you a good body, but you may go bankrupt in the meantime. And when you're a new distillery, you want to make great whiskey, but you don't want to wait 10 years, and that was our challenge. So I'll stop there because we should really start to drink. And we're going to start, if that's okay, with our best-selling whiskey, our first ever whiskey that was released, and still 80% of our sales are in this. This is called Cotswolds Signature Single Malt. So when our first whiskey was ready in 2017, this was it, and it's still our #1 seller. Shall I pass it around? Maybe you pour yourself and keep on going? Hmm?
So we're all adults. Everyone knows how much they'd like to taste. So we just.
There's 5 of them tonight, and you're probably going to want a few other ones. So, you know. Yeah, please do help yourself. So while it's going around, I'll tell you about what this is. So, Signature is made of 2 types of cask. It's all obviously barley. 70% of what's in this glass was aged in an ex-red wine cask, which was invented by Jim Swan. He gave it a name some of you might have heard called STR. STR stands for shaved, toasted, re-charred. He came up with this cask when he was working with Kavalan, with Ian Chang, to build the Kavalan distillery. Kavalan is very hot in Taiwan, has a very big angel share, and could not wait 10 years. They wanted a good whiskey in 3 or 4 years with a lot of flavor. And Jim had the idea to take an American oak ex-red wine cask, to shave it about this much, to toast it, and then to char it, to set it on fire. And the true story is, before I even knew who Jim Swan was, I tasted a very famous whiskey from Kavalan called Vinho Barrique, if you've ever tried, one world's best single malt. I fell in love with the flavor. I just thought if I had to have one whiskey I was left on a desert island with, this would be my flavor. Because it had Armagnac, bourbon, and single malt all together. All these different flavors swirling around. So we've used a lot. Then I found out that Jim made them, and half of our barrels that we buy are STR. We buy them from a Portuguese cooperage called DS. 70% of what you're drinking is STR, which is a first fill barrel. The other 30% is a first fill bourbon barrel. We get some fantastic bourbon casks. Mostly they're Basil Hayden's. They're unwashed. Most bourbon casks these days in Kentucky, they're steaming them or rinsing with hot water and keeping the extra alcohol. We'd rather keep that little bit of bourbon ourselves, so we pay a little bit more to get really good quality bourbon casks. The casks are emptied, they're mixed together, and then they're put back in the barrel for several months to marry. And this marriage integrates the 2 casks together very nicely. And they kind of work well together. You get the fruit, I think already you're probably tasting the fruit. People sometimes, we like to describe it as English breakfast whiskey. If you were going to have a whiskey for breakfast, you think about orange marmalade on toast, tea. These are sort of these nice imagery. I just simply call it very often my kitchen counter whiskey, because I have about 300 whiskeys in the living room, and I have 1 bottle on the kitchen counter, and that's this. This is the kind of, when you don't want to think too much, you don't want to stare at a whole wall of whiskeys and do, you know the story behind all of them, but you just want flavor, balance. And I think the 2 words, if I had to describe Cotswolds, flavor and balance. Depth of flavor, but balance. When I say balance, I mean not too much wood, not too much distillate. The right marriage between the 2. And the thing I'm most proud about is that this whiskey, ever since 2017, we still make it every year, at 3 years old. And we have made it at 5, 6, 7. We now have 10-year-old. The 10-year-old, I just bottled a 10-year-old, only 300 bottles, and I would say it has a little bit more elegance. It has maybe a little bit more of a nose, a bit more complex in the nose, and maybe a little bit of a longer finish. But the middle part, which I think is what most people are drinking whiskey generally for, which is the palate and the flavor and the depth of the flavor, is the same here after 3 years as it is for 10 years. And so this is something we're very proud of. We're also very proud of the price, because this is a 50 € whiskey. And we don't make much money on a 50 € whiskey, given the kind of production that we do. It's very expensive. It may be actually insane I don't know yet, but I have a dream that I think through a reasonably priced whiskey of good quality, that we could be the first English whiskey that goes to the next level in terms of awareness and sort of, acceptance. We have 10 different whiskeys that all that are different prices, that are different ages, that are different strengths, but I always like to start with this because, as you can tell, I believe in it a lot. So we're going to go back and forth on this tasting. We're going to go up in strength, down in strength. And we'll end on a little bit of a smoky note, the last one. But this one is the second one I wanted you to try. This is because now that you've tried something which is, and the reason, by the way, that I made it 70-30, 70% STR, 30% bourbon, is because I felt that 100% STR, some people would not recognize as a whiskey. They see it almost more as a brandy because it has that very intense brandy-like flavor. I love it. This is called Founder's Choice. It's 100% STR, so tells you how I feel. It's my choice. But I think it's lovely. But some people, again, the idea was to try and get a balance between the bourbon and the STR. And we simply tried 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, 90-10. And blending is very interesting. Sometimes when you hit on the right ratio, I don't know why it is, but if you try 80-20, it's not as good. And if you try 60-40, it's not as good on this one. This is basically one of four whiskeys, which are called cask expressions, which are 100% one type of barrel. So we have four. This is 100% wine, STR. We have 100% sherry, 100% bourbon cask, and 100% peated cask, which you're going to try last. I'll pass this one around. This is 59.5%.
They are all STR.
This is all STR, this one. Yeah, 100%. So just in terms of getting a sense of what this cask really tastes like, this is a good way of doing it. And I don't know if there's any water here, because it's nice to, I see one little glass there. I don't know if you want to share. Thank you very much. Because it does open up very nice with a few drops of water, very nicely. So water is here if anybody wants to. Thank you very much. Anybody wants to try a little bit of water with it. So the STR, hopefully you've enjoyed that. Again, I sort of describe it as having elements of a brandy, elements of a bourbon, but on a single malt, and that's why I think it's a lovely drink. And also, as I said, with water, it's really lengthens out very nicely. And the magic of this barrel is that the flavor that you're tasting was created within 12 months of putting the whiskey in the barrel. The rest of the time, it's oxidation. It's the legal 3-year limit, of course, whatever. But if you try this whiskey at 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 9 years, the flavor is there. It gets more elegant over time because you're getting more air in there. But the delivery of the flavor is incredibly rapid, and it's a lovely flavor. It only works one time. It only works on the first fill of that cask. We now are second filling some STRs, and they're lovely, but the same amount of flavor, it takes 6, 7, 8 years to achieve the same amount of flavor. I say to people that the whiskey is a little bit like a tea bag. You know, the British drink a lot of tea. You can use a tea bag 2, 3, 4 times to make a cup of tea, but every time you need to let it sit in the water for longer. And so I always say that our friends up in Scotland have a lot of old tea bags in their warehouses, and they have the ability to let whiskey sit for a very long time. Again, they're not under the same pressure, but this is why I'm such a fan of English whiskey right now, because you've got a whole category, a whole group of whiskey makers that have started in the last 5 or 10 years. They're all thinking a little bit like me. They want to make great whiskey quickly. And if you go, and nowadays, by the way, in November, there is an amazing whiskey festival. If you're ever in England in November, it's in Birmingham, called the English Whiskey Festival. And it's an entire whiskey festival, not quite this size, but about half this size, only English whiskey makers. And the quality of the English whiskeys is really, really good. It's really high. And because all of these people are using they're all doing things the right way. They're typically using very good quality ingredients, very good wood, and their techniques and their kit is very good. So it's a really interesting category. We're going to go back down in strength now, back to a more reasonable 46. I'm pretty sure 46. Yeah, we are 46. There is a funny story behind this whiskey. So this whiskey you see is not called Cotswolds, it's called Highgrove. And Highgrove is the private residence of King Charles. And the reason this is called Highgrove is because we have a collaboration with them, which is based on the fact that the barley out of which this whiskey was made was grown on the Highgrove estate, which is in the Cotswolds, by the way, about 1 hour south of us. The Cotswolds is about 150 kilometers north to south from Bath to Birmingham, along the west, sort of the middle west of England. So 9 years ago, I heard from our maltster that he was malting some barley grown on the Highgrove estate by Prince Charles at that time. And the type of barley was called Plumage Archer. Plumage Archer was one of the very first varieties of malting barley. And it was actually invented at Warminster Maltings, at our maltings. And Prince Charles was growing it organically, and I said, I really would love to make some whiskey with that barley. And I bought 20 ton of that barley, being told that I could not use the name at all. I could not let this, because the name was already promised to various different food companies and whatever. But 7 years went by, we had made the whiskey, it was in the warehouse, and the new person who is in charge of retail and marketing for Highgrove, because Highgrove, the king opens his gardens in Highgrove to the public, and you can go and visit the gardens. They're beautiful gardens, and there is a shop. Of course, you exit through the gift shop, and the gift shop is selling various things for the King's Foundation Charitable Trust, and that's where this is selling. But the guy who runs this came to our distillery to visit. We gave him some of his own whiskey to try, and he said, well, we have a coronation coming in 2 months. How about we do a single cask for the coronation? I said, absolutely. It sold out at $400 pounds a bottle. It sold out in 24 hours. And they came back to us the following week saying, could we do another bottling? That was really good. And so we did a second bottling. Then we did a third one for his 75th birthday, a fourth one for the 20th wedding anniversary with Queen Camilla. And this one is very special because this is the first permanent whiskey, permanent SKU that will be on offer. It's called Evergreen. And what's very special about it, and I don't have the box here, but if you go to the stand and you see the box, the art on the box is a painting painted by King Charles of the house, which he's allowed us to use. So it's kind of a nice collaboration. King, he is a big fan. He's a very cool guy. He's ahead of his time on the environment and also in terms of the importance of traditional craftsmanship. So it works very well in terms of the sort of the shared values and what he's about. I'll pass this around and I'll say when you try this, you might be getting some different flavors in terms of the cask variety. It is still a mix of the bourbon and the red wine casks, but it is a different type of barley. So this is going to go more towards the fruity, towards the floral, a very nice, easygoing whiskey, maybe an aperitif whiskey, but still with, big fruitiness and big flavor. So I hope you enjoy it. And hopefully by now you're picking up the house style a little bit. Which again, if we had the new make, you would see the direct line from the new make to the signature to the founders, but fruity, floral is how I describe it. I like to sometimes say if you feel that a whiskey should taste like the place, if you go to the Cotswolds, you won't find big mountains, crashing waves, cliffs. It looks more like an impressionist painting. It's very soft, it's very round, it's very green. It's green and yellow because the homes are all made of this honey-colored golden limestone. Cotswold stone is what it's called. And it's just, if you think of the image of the English countryside, that's what it is. And that's the type of whiskey I thought we ought to make. But that being said, it is also a reflection, of course, of the casks that are used. And mostly we're using, as I said, first fill cask. The STR is a first fill cask. The bourbons we buy are first fill. We are refilling them now once, but for the first couple of years we would just sell them. After one use, we would sell them. 10% of our filling, or maybe a little less, maybe 8 or 9%, is sherry casks. They're very expensive. Even with sherry casks, I'm looking for first fill casks. That may seem strange. Some people might say, why aren't you buying a bodega cask, as they call it, which was used in the sherry trade for 10, 20 years. There's a problem you have with wine casks, which is sulfur. I don't know if any of you have ever detected sulfur in certain whiskeys, particularly wine cask whiskeys, sherry cask whiskeys. The reason you get the sulfur is because when a winemaker empties the cask, they don't know how long that cask will sit empty until it gets refilled, and during that time it could get moldy. So what they'll do is they'll burn a sulfur candle inside, and the sulfur for them is not detectable. Really in wine, you don't get much, but whiskey is many times the strength of wine, and it just extracts the stronger alcohol, pulls it out. And you fill your cask and you wait a year, 2 years, you then try your cask, and once you develop a nose for it, they sometimes say it's like a struck match, or sometimes a little bit like an eggy kind of quality. And some people like it, actually. Some people like that flavor. But other people really don't. And I just didn't want to take the risk of having these bad surprises after several years. So the sherry casks that we buy are newly coopered casks, which have been filled with different types of sherries, Oloroso, Pedro Jimenez, and seasoned for several years, and then sent directly to us. So I know at least that there's no sulfur in it. We buy from an amazing gentleman in Spain by the name of Miguel Martin, who is one of the bigger suppliers of sherry casks. You know, Glenn Farkless, Glenn Ellicky, Macallan, everyone has dealt with Miguel. He's an amazing man. He runs an amazing operation. He does everything from, he owns the sawmills, one in Pennsylvania and one in Galicia, for Spanish and American oak. And he has the coopering, and he has the winemaking, and he has the warehouse storage. He even has a vinegar factory. After the sherry's been used several times for seasoning, he'll make sherry vinegar from it. So it's an incredible operation, and he probably makes the most sherry of anybody in Spain. None of it goes into a bottle. It all goes into barrels for whiskey, which is sort of sad. But the cask costs 5 times as much as a bourbon or a red wine cask. What we did for Pot Still, for this show, is we bottled one cask, which was a Hogshead, 250 liter, American oak Oloroso seasoned cask, and I'll pass it around. This is actually this is 62%, just full, right out of the cask. And for those of you who like these flavors, it is a full strength sherry whiskey. It's I suppose the British like to say Christmas in a bottle, because it's got all these Christmas flavors, the dried fruit, the Christmas pudding, etc. This one is full on. You have to like that flavor. I like it once a year. I like it at Christmas. You know, when I'm sitting back the sofa, you know, in the fire, and it's dark out. You know, but it's yeah. We make, by the way, we also make gin. And if any of you like gin, that's not a bad word, by the way, here. In fact, actually, I always sneak a bottle into whiskey shows, because people who have been tasting whiskey for 2 hours, their palates just are kind of fatigued. And this is almost like, you know, sometimes at the end of a meal you have a little sorbet. It cleans your palate and it refreshes you, and we make an amazing gin. So come by our stand if you need a little palate cleansing. We do crazy things, like we peel 500 grapefruits and 800 limes by hand, because we use fresh peel in the gin. Why, in a way, is gin more financially viable? Because you use gin a lot more. You're making gin and tonics, you're making Negronis, you're making whatever. And I know in my house, the bottles of gin just seem to always, we need a new bottle of gin, but the whiskey always goes down a little bit lower. So Signature was an attempt to make a whiskey which you could drink more freely, kind of. So We have one more now after the sherry bomb to completely confuse your palates. And this is the second of the cask series. So this being the first, and as I said, the other two, I didn't bring in our sherry cask, but we have it on the stand. The difference between the sherry cask and what you've just had is the sherry cask has both Pedro Jimenez and Oloroso and two different kinds of wood. But this one is peated cask. Peated cask, not peated grain. I was not going to make a peated whiskey. And I said, why should I make a peated whiskey in the Cotswolds? There's no peat growing in the Cotswolds. It's not really from our terroir, if you could say that anything is from our terroir, because there's never been whiskey made in the Cotswolds. I like peat. When I'm on Islay or in Scotland, I'll drink a peated malt, and then I buy a whole bunch of them, and then I never drink them when I get home, because I typically don't it's not my natural thing that I look for. But one of our friends, a whiskey maker in Wales, showed us an experiment they had done by putting their unpeated whiskey in a Lafroig quarter cask. And we tasted it, we said, that's really lovely, let's try that out. And we were we weren't big risk takers. It was, let's try one. And then when we tried it 6 months later, we said, maybe we should go to 2. And then we went to 4. And then we realized, you have to actually make more. And now this is actually a decent size SKU for us. But it is unpeated Cotswolds. It's full term age. By the way, the other thing about all of these things and everything we do, we don't finish in Cotswolds. You won't see a finished whiskey. What I mean by that, if finishing is you take a cask which is not very good for 10 years, and then for the last year you put it in something which has some flavor, which is a sort of a decent new cask, which, frankly, you might as well be, teaspooning some sherry into it or whatever. We like to put the new make into a good cask and let it live in the sherry cask for its whole time. Let it live in a Madeira cask or a port cask or a Sauterne cask. We have tried many casks, and we have a special edition that comes out once a year, which is always some interesting cask flavor. We have a Pinot de Charente that we've done one year. We have a maple syrup cask, which is insanely maple syrupy. Sake casks, Tokai casks, vermouth casks, you name it. But why did I mention? Well, this is, I suppose, the same, because it's full-term aging in an excellent cask. So if you pass this around and start pouring it, those of you who, the first of you who try it will notice one thing which you might be surprised about compared to a peated whiskey. No peat. No peat on the nose. Exactly. It's a secret peat almost. It's a very light peat. Somebody once said to me, and I thought this was a great expression, peat should be used as a seasoning, not as an ingredient. And I thought that's how I would describe peat. There are peated whiskeys I love, and I find particularly if you can marry a peat and a sweet whiskey. My gateway peated whiskey was Lagavulin 16. I always found it rewarded you for the peat by giving you a lot of fruit and sweetness behind it. And this one, in a way, is the same in that once you take a sip, it just sort of spreads across your palate, and you get just a slight little bit of smokiness, just enough to tell you that there's some peat in there, but not to overwhelm the distillate and the bourbon cask, which is what these these are quarter casks, they're 125 liter casks. I think it's lovely to have a lot of different expressions, and it's fun, and it shows. What attracted me to whiskey in the first place is if you try 10 casks, you're trying 10 different whiskeys. Sometimes the differences are very small, but it's really interesting that you have them. Oh, by the way, our Angels share is insane. I didn't tell you that. We have very thirsty Angels in the Cotswolds, 4 to 5% a year, which is about double Scotland, because we're 500 miles further south in the middle of the country, and it's very warm sometimes. Sometimes it rains a lot, but it definitely there's bigger temperature swings, and so that also means that signature makes a lot of sense for us, because there's 85% of that cask left when we bottle it, rather than 50% when we're at 10 years. So that concludes the tasting, but there's more out there if you'd like to come out and chat, and there's certainly some very lovely gins as well. And I would just say, besides thanking you for taking the time to listen to me going on, that I would love to invite you all to come and visit us. We won an award 2 years in a row for most popular whiskey distillery in all of Britain and Ireland, which sounds crazy, but this company, this consulting company, measured it based on social media metrics, on likes, and on TripAdvisor reviews, whatever. We have a really, really lovely visitor center with a lovely restaurant, and it's a place you can sort of hang out, and also you can come with walking shoes and just go from the distillery into the hills because we're in the middle of a very beautiful rural area. So please do come and visit us, and if you do, ask for me, and if you can bear to hear me for again a repeat, I'm happy to show you around myself. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.